I'm Head of the Curve, also known as James Bergman, and in today's interview I am talking with Lloyd Evans, the ex-Jehovah's Witness YouTuber and author of The Reluctant Apostate and How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses. On Lloyd's YouTube channel, Lloyd Evans, he discusses the Jehovah's Witness doctrine and also tries to help those who are either currently in the religion or out of it, if they need any help, any reconciliation after leaving the religion. What I particularly like about Lloyd's channel is the fact that he doesn't only try and help those who are exiting the Jehovah's Witness doctrine, but also those who potentially could be presently in it and who are having doubts. But also, and most importantly, his channel is a home for critical thinking overall and education, and for speaking sincerely about sensitive topics that quite literally, in this case, in the case of the Jehovah's Witness religion, this religion does make a mark on people's lives, undoubtedly, and what Lloyd does is extremely admirable, and his honesty really does seep through in the video that follows. As many of you may have noticed, this is my first video on the topic of Jehovah's Witness religion, and I want to broaden my horizons, talk about different religions as much as I can, not only Islam, Judaism, Christianity. So yeah, hopefully there's more to come in that regard. I hope you guys really enjoy this video. Leave a comment if you have anything to say. Please leave a like if you genuinely enjoyed the video, and of course share where you can. That would really help the channel out. And remember, if you want to donate to the channel to help me get better equipment and to maintain the channel overall, then check out my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. And lastly, don't forget to check out Lloyd's channel. All right, enjoy. Lloyd Evans, thank you so much for coming on the channel. It's great to have you on.
It's an absolute delight. Thanks for having me.
I really like your channel. I think you've been going for quite a few years now at this point, because I remember I think I was first exposed to your channel when you did a conversation with Cosmic Skeptic, and that what was that, like maybe 4 years ago, something like that, maybe.
Feels like forever ago. I think that may have been like maybe 2017-ish, 2017, 2018, something like that.
Yeah. And then it was to my great surprise that you also talked to Chris Duckman as well, which he's been literally one of my top 5 favorite YouTubers for the past, like probably for the longest time actually overall, probably for maybe 10 years, because he's been on the platform for a long time, and I absolutely loved that discussion with him. Just to see you two together, it was a good treat, I must say.
Thank you. I enjoyed that conversation, and yeah, it was a surprise to me when he first reached out, because I'm not like a massive consumer of YouTube videos about movies, but even I'd seen his movie reviews. So when he first reached out to me, which was a long time before the interview, and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness too," I was like, wow. And then when he finally felt comfortable talking about his story, he of course did his own video, and then he came on my channel. It was a real treat to compare notes with him.
Yeah, no. Anyone who hasn't seen that video, who's watching this one, I'd highly recommend it. So I just want to get straight into the questions, I suppose. And before I ask you, about your past in the religion, Jehovah's Witness religion, and your emancipation from it. What is Jehovah's Witness religion? How would you go about explaining what it actually is to somebody who really doesn't know anything about it? Let's just say the audience really just is new to this topic. How would you explain that?
It's a movement that started in the late 19th century under the banner of the Bible students. It was founded by Charles Taze Russell, or the organization, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, was founded by Charles Taze Russell, and it was Charles Taze Russell who began publishing the Watchtower magazine. And after Russell's death, he was succeeded by Joseph Rutherford. Think of Charles Taze Russell as like L. Ron Hubbard, and Joseph Rutherford is like David Miscavige. Rutherford took over and introduced a lot of his own very unpleasant personality into the religion and rebranded it Jehovah's Witnesses. And then you had Nathan Knorr. And then after Nathan Knorr, the organization changed its leadership style to the point where instead of having a single leader, it had a governing body. And to this day, you have, at the moment, 8 men who are ruling over the lives of 8 million people or 8.5 million people around the world. They're a Bible literalist religion. They're a creationist religion, even though they reject that label because they're quite embarrassed by the likes of Ken Ham and Ray Comfort. But they do believe that man's origins come from the Garden of Eden. And yes, they have a whole bunch of beliefs and policies that are very abusive and damaging in people's lives, including shunning, refusal of blood transfusions, and the cover-up of child abuse.
Yeah, and a lot of that as well you've covered in your channel, quite extensively, and your success. I mean, you are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, channel for the subject of Jehovah's Witness. You're pretty big. Yeah.
I'm not the biggest XJW YouTuber. There's Telltale, my friend Telltale, who has a very, very big channel, but he kind of does more. He kind of diversifies more into all sorts of other religions, which I'm sort of trying to start doing myself. But yeah, in terms of channels that focus solely on or almost exclusively on Jehovah's Witnesses, I guess, yeah, I'm probably the biggest.
Yeah, well, I want to congratulate you on, how you've grown it as well, because obviously, we both have our own channels, and it's just really hard, especially at the beginning. But I think for you, though, your channel is based on something that can never be taken away from you. It's you, it's your past, it's your history, and the impression that I get from your videos is that you're incredibly honest and brave as well. I mean, I felt that way about Chris Stuckman as well. It's quite clear to me that, in the original video that the video that he published himself, because I know that there was a one before that when he was just like, screw it. But when watching Ex-Jehovah's Witness, it does feel that the emotion seeps from them, through their pores, and you really see that it affected their being, because as we're going to go into a bit later, it really does encapsulate, or at least it tries to, every element of who you are, what you think, what who you love, and how you love. It really is an engulfing religion in some sense. Before we get more into that, could you go into your kind of journey from, as briefly as you can, I suppose, because I understand it's a very detailed kind of journey, but and I know you've done it many times, so I do apologize, but I'm sure you're used to it to some extent by this point. But I'd be really grateful if you could go into that, and just your journey from then to now.
Yeah, if you want the unabridged version, I have a book called The Reluctant Apostate, yes. Shameless plug. But yes, I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and I grew up very devoutly, taking it very, very seriously. And then when I was about 19 or 20, I had a bit of a crisis of faith because I started to doubt the teachings. But then when I was 21, my mother died, and that caused me to kind of retreat further into my indoctrination because I was terrified at the thought of never seeing her again, and I wanted to see her again in the future paradise when she would be supposedly resurrected. And then I ended up going to a special school for young Jehovah's Witness men, and among my classmates was someone from Croatia. So on our first reunion, we decided to all meet up in Croatia, and it was there that I met Diana, who I ended up marrying and having 2 children with. And it was moving to Croatia that led me to start doubting finally confront my doubt, because I was finally in a situation where I was attending Kingdom Hall meetings and no longer kind of plugged in to the indoctrination all the time. And I was able to think for myself and think, hang on, does this really make sense? And, before long, I was going down the rabbit hole and learning about all of the many ways in which Jehovah's Witnesses are lied to and manipulated. I ended up starting a blog on jwsurvey.org, which became jwwatch.org. I started what was then the John Cedars YouTube channel, because I was working under a pseudonym, but then later changed it to my real name, Lloyd Evans. Wrote 2 books, appeared on TV a couple of times, and yeah, that's the summary.
Yeah, I mean, it's and how long could you go over how long, like the period of time this was that, from it, were you? I'm trying to remember the age. It was very young, wasn't it? Could you go over how long this period of time actually was?
Well, I was baptized at the age of 11, and it's important to remember that you're taught, or the teaching is, that unless you get baptized as a Jehovah's Witness, you will very likely die at Armageddon, which is going to come any moment. So there was obviously a lot of pressure to get baptized, and when I got baptized, I wasn't fully informed about all of the various problems with the religion. So that was age 11, and then by sort of 18, 19, I'd been appointed as a ministerial servant, which is kind of like a deacon. And then when I was 25, I went to ministerial training school. When I was 27, I got married. When I was 29, we moved to Croatia, and by the time I was 30, I was starting to wake up, and now I'm 42. So talking long spans of time.
Yeah, well, it's something that you won't forget, and of course, it's something that you've certainly revolved the rest of your life around. And I feel like it's very, like I was saying before, your channel is unique in the regard of it literally being you. It's about you, but also highlighting not just things about your past, but actually how your past can actually impact other people in the situation that you were in. And I'm sure that you had a lot of, I know you have a lot of contacts from people struggling, and perhaps even Jehovah's Witnesses, who are still committed, but they're having doubts, and they've come across your channel. I mean, how often is that for you? It must be pretty often, I imagine.
Yeah, I get voicemails through quite regularly. I also get emails, and people try to reach out in various other ways. To be honest, I've long ago given up trying to keep on top of every message, and it's really sad, actually, because you like to think that when people reach out to you because you've said something that's moved them in some way, or something that they found profoundly meaningful, you like to think that you'll have the time for them and be there to do a little bit of aftercare. But the problem is, it's a religion with, as I said, 8.5 million followers. So that means that the number of people leaving in any given year is in the thousands. And I'm not saying that there are thousands of people reaching out to me every year. It's probably more like hundreds. But even so, it's very, very difficult to both do the job that I'm doing, that's generating all the interest, and answer all the messages that come through. But I do try to answer at least some of them in the form of the voicemail videos that I do on my channel. So I invite viewers to leave a voicemail of up to 5 minutes, and I choose the ones that I think my audience will most appreciate or most find helpful in navigating their own issues. So I've had actual elders, who are currently attending Kingdom Hall meetings and who are currently kind of seen as quite prominent in the organization, contacting me and, even leaving voicemails. So that just shows, in a way, how toxic the group is, because the threat of shunning means that people don't feel free to leave, and they have, if they do disagree, they have to do so surreptitiously.
Yeah, and speaking of the numbers, I was thinking, why is it that in the modern age do you think it's such a, in looking at what it is, right, and how you produce content around it and talk around it, how is it that it's so comparatively big? Why is it even still around? Have you hypothesized about that?
Yeah, there are historical reasons, really. Back when it was under the control of Joseph Rutherford, it was still a relatively small group, and we're talking about like a movement that was mostly on the eastern seaboard of America, with one or two branches around the world. But it was in its maybe hundreds of thousands back then. It certainly wasn't a notable kind of group in terms of numbers, but under the presidency of Nathan Knorr, it just ballooned in size. And I think that was largely down to Nathan Knorr just being very good at identifying ways of marketing the Jehovah's Witness brand, not just in America, but all around the world. So he was very, very big on kind of expansion and flying around and making sure more branches got set up. And so it was really due to Nathan Knorr that Jehovah's Witnesses got into the millions and became like a household name. And I think once you get past a certain threshold in terms of membership, it almost becomes self-perpetuating, because what you can do then is you can encourage Jehovah's Witness parents to indoctrinate their children. And all you need to do then is just have babies, basically. And just through Jehovah's Witnesses having kids and indoctrinating their kids, you're always going to have some kind of growth. And that's what I think we're seeing today. We're at the point now where I don't think the actual door-to-door preaching work for which Jehovah's Witnesses are famous actually does much good or makes much of an impact on their numbers. I think the vast majority of people getting baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses every year, which is something like 200,000, is mostly people who, like me, were, indoctrinated from their earliest memories.
Yeah, I mean, the same is true, I would say, because we've all come across this slogan that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, and for a while I was like, maybe there's a good reason for that. And then I was thinking, as I was reading more, I was like, well, looking at the culture of where Islam is predominantly the case, people's religions, Islam not in of itself, but the culture is more so. They propagate that having more children is ideal, and to spread the word of Islam and the teachings and so on. And then I came to that conclusion that was Islam isn't necessarily the fastest growing religion in the world because of its truth, which a lot of Muslims would like to say, of course. But in my opinion, it's more the fact that it's the procreation, it's the children. And also I have an issue with it's more specific in the JW, but like in Islam, and I guess Christianity, maybe less Judaism, or no, actually more Judaism perhaps, because in those religions, it's not as if a lot of people who believe in those religions, you have to question to what extent do they believe in it? Because if you ask someone on the street, they might be, yeah, like I was born a Catholic or something, and I've never really renounced it. And if I'm asked right now, yes, sure, I'm a Catholic. But like, I think there's a difference between saying you are something and acting as if you are the thing. And so I do feel like the statistics to say, let's say that, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. I think there is a reason for that, but not the reason that Muslims might not want to admit. It's the propagation of children, and also perhaps the fact that across the board in religions anyway, people don't mind just casually calling themselves a Muslim or a Christian, and I think that's a big part of it. And so the statistics can be misleading, basically. I do think that because the face value is obviously like, oh well, the more people in a religion, the more true it might be. But intuitively and of course logically, it doesn't quite make sense in that regard. Also, so you regard the Jehovah's Witness religion as a cult, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. So, what if a Jehovah's Witness turned around to you and said, "Hey, look, why do you call us a cult? What makes it a cult? What do you think validates that title of the religion?" I'm sure many people get offended at that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, if I was having a conversation with a believing Jehovah's Witness, I don't think I would use that word with them, because it's such a loaded word. It's basically a pejorative. And if I were speaking to a Jehovah's Witness, I'm the sort of person who would want to try to make the conversation as productive and respectful as possible. And you don't persuade someone by offending them, So even though I think it's a cult, I wouldn't kind of go at them from that angle. But if they were to come to me and let's say they'd watched some of my videos and they'd seen a video in which I refer to it as a cult, and they said, you're wrong, or why do you say that? I'd just point them at the dictionary. I've just Googled cult meaning, and it says a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. That's noun one. And noun two, a person or thing that is popular or fashionable among a particular group or section of society. And it's the first one, really, about religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. You have this system where you have to give your devotion to a group of men. Now, other definitions that I've read narrow it down even further and say, oh, it has to be a group. If it's a group, then it has to be a group with just one leader. And obviously that's nonsense. You can have cults with multiple leaders. A cult, let's say you have a movement with one leader and everyone's in agreement that it's a cult. If the leader starts to share power with his wife or with like two or three colleagues, it doesn't suddenly not become a cult. It's doing exactly the same thing. It's just that the leadership style has changed somewhat. Yeah. So I personally consider any group that teaches, I'm the sort of atheist that says that any group that teaches unsubstantiated dogma, especially to children, is a cult. I just think that the word cult can be over deployed, and I think that there can be such things as soft cults and extreme cults. And so I would class, for example, the Catholic Church or Protestantism as a soft cult, and I would class Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, Westboro Baptist Church as extreme cults.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, from the get-go, let's be honest, the fact that it's run by men tells you a lot, right? I mean, that is quite worrying.
Well, men and predominantly white men. I'm covering the convention, and for the last 3 years, they've done online conventions, and they have I'm going to say 20. Is it? Yeah, about 20 guys alternating to give the talks, and these are like the governing body members and governing body helpers. And out of all of them, there's only 3 who are people of color. So, and I'm not going to bang on about about all of about the the racism issue, because Jehovah's Witnesses are conspicuously non-racist, at least now. In the past, it was different. But it surely says something about the lack of diversity in the organization if people of color are so underrepresented in the leadership.
So why do you think there is a lack of representation from all types of ethnicities? Is there a reason for that in like the in the scripture itself, in the interpretations?
I think that I think that Jehovah's Witnesses, even though they've been around since the 19th century, they're still what might be classed as a new religion. A lot of the ideas and policies that they have can be directly traced to decisions that were made in the 1940s, 1950s. And it was only around the 1950s that they really started to change their views on race, because going back to the writings of Charles Taze Russell, Charles Taze Russell wrote that one day the skin of the Ethiopian would turn white. So he believed that black people would turn white in God's new system of things. At the showing of the photo drama of creation, which is actually, if you're interested, one of the very first motion pictures that was ever released. It was a Jehovah's Witness production. Okay. It was an 8-hour film, believe it or not.
God. Okay.
So that would have been quite some going, even for Chris Stuckman to review.
True.
But they had segregation during the viewing of that in one of the New York theaters. So there's a very clear history of racism in the organization. And, my theory is that even though, again, nowadays they're all about, you can be a Jehovah's Witness no matter what race or what country you come from. And they show that very clearly in their literature and in the illustrations and in the videos. I just think it's probably in the organization's DNA still a little bit of that racism, so that the previous generations of leadership, because they were mostly white, they selected newer members who were mostly white. And so now you have 8 governing body members and only 1 is black. And yeah, I can't see things changing drastically anytime soon.
I mean, yeah, this is all part of a cumulative case, isn't it? Really, I mean, when we look at all these individual things, that there might be one thing itself, but they all add up essentially, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big issue. Could you expand on the role of the elders and the Watchtower company magazine? Can you explain like what this is basically?
So the Watchtower magazine sort of used to be the vehicle of new understandings of scripture or new teachings. It was the Watchtower that would always give you the new light, or whatever it was you're supposed to now believe. It would come in the Watchtower. And I would argue that that's slightly less so now, because they're all about videos nowadays, and they're all about them,
unfortunately.
They're all about their kind of events at conventions and annual meetings, and they've actually drastically reduced the amount of printing they do. So they're becoming far more about digital media rather than printed media, which kind of makes a lot of sense financially.
Yeah.
So they do still publish the Watchtower, and it is still part of the Jehovah's Witness kind of routine to once a week get together and literally study it paragraph by paragraph. But you're not going to see Watchtowers being banded around as conspicuously by Jehovah's Witnesses when they're preaching as perhaps in the past. When it comes to elders for Jehovah's Witnesses are very different to when it comes to elders for Mormons. It seems that for LDS church members, you can be an elder really, really young. It takes very little to be an elder, I think, when you're an LDS church member. But for Jehovah's Witnesses, although they are starting to, out of necessity, recruit from a younger age, it generally is harder to work yourself up the ladder to that level. I was an elder for a year, and I stood down before moving to Croatia. But elders have an enormous amount of power in their congregations. So let's say you have a congregation of, I'm going to say 80 Jehovah's Witnesses. Typically, you would have maybe 7 or 8 elders in that congregation. That the absolute minimum is 3. And the elders are all answerable to the organization. So they get a visit twice a year from a circuit overseer who makes sure that everything is being done according to how the organization wants. Elders each have a handbook called The Shepherd, the Flock of God, that normal Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to read. So normal Jehovah's Witnesses don't get to see what all the rules are. And if there are any problems, let's say, involving child sexual abuse, elders are under strict orders to first contact the branch rather than notifying the police. So they are very much kind of line managers for this centralized authority. There's the governing body, and under the control of the governing body, you have the branches in different parts of the world, including Britain.
Yeah, I mean, covering up the child abuse is abhorrent to me, and I know that it's definitely a topic that you've covered a lot, because quite rightly, it's something that requires knowledge of, from the outside and the inside, if if you can reach anybody. From what I noticed so I'm weird, and I like. So when I'm outside and I'm walking around in like my local town, there are Jehovah's Witnesses who have stands there, and I'm a very weird person. I like to go up to them and I like to have a conversation. I like to learn more about them and ask them about asking questions. I do this whenever I'm stopped, which is weirdly quite often. I don't know what it is about me, but I am stopped, probably because I don't know, I'm 22, and yeah, I don't know, I'm gold to hire.
Your prime recruitment age, yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I had a discussion recently with you guys, and because I was really interested in what kind of books they read and how they get their information. And I'm very accommodating to to people with opposite views of me, but what it seemed was that they hadn't really read anything other than their own material, and that was quite jarring, because I was, for example, asking them, okay, well, what do you think about Islam, right? What do you think about Islam's view? And then what do you think about Christianity? And then, how is JW, different, and so on. And the responses I got were just very evasive. And I don't know if that's because they were starting to get irritated of my company. But I was just asking questions and being very curious. But it seemed to me that there weren't really any answers that I was getting. It felt like a lot of it was a rehearsed kind of thing, right? That
you wouldn't believe how rehearsed it is. You wouldn't believe how rehearsed. They even have videos called sample conversations. If you go on the jw.org website and type in sample conversations and click on videos, you're going to see a whole bunch of kind of silhouetted videos that literally give Jehovah's Witnesses a script of what to say when they initially start speaking to someone, when they're doing the return visit, and when they're doing the Bible study. So everything that they say to you, obviously they're given some freedom to kind of put things in their own words to some degree, but they're trained to that degree where they have a script that they will go through when they approach you. And they know very, very little about other religions. I can remember when I was young, they released a book called Mankind's Search for God, and it was a book about all of the world's other religions and how they were all wrong. And it's kind of stuck in my mind because one of the illustrations has a picture of early South American cultures. I think it might have been the Aztecs, and they're on top of some pyramid, and someone's having his heart ripped out, and it's an actual kind of full color painting of someone's heart being ripped out while he's screaming, and there's blood pouring everywhere.
Wow!
And that sort of picture kind of stays in your mind, and you think, gosh, that's the sort of savagery that there is outside of my nice, comfortable Jehovah's Witness bubble. I don't want to go down the road of investigating what other Jehovah's Witness, what other religions teach, because conveniently it's all been done for me. All of my research and thinking has been done for me. So hey, that's that ticked off.
Yeah.
And that's kind of in a way the weird addiction that the notion of absolute truth offers you. And Jehovah's Witnesses aren't the only ones to do this. When groups come along and say, good news, we've got everything figured out, and we may not personally and individually know all of the answers, but we have quick access to a book or a library where all the information is there if you want to do the digging. And anything that's not there isn't worth knowing about.
Yeah.
And it's very, very addictive, I would say. It's like being on some kind of drug when you're in that mindset, because it makes you completely indifferent to even the possibility that there might be other ways of thinking and other ideas outside of your bubble.
But when I picked up the little handbooks that they have on their stalls, and I've actually picked up, I've seen them over the years actually, and I think the front cover has been exactly the same for a while, if I remember correctly, because I don't know, it just, I can always spot it from a mile away. But recently when I had that discussion, which was maybe a month ago or so, I picked up one of the books and I genuinely read through it. I was interested in reading it and seeing what they had to say, and what I found was only appeals to suffering, basically appeals to the pain we go through in our life and their issues with it, right? Well, and God's solution, of course. Can you hear that in the background? It's
I can hear something, but it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. It was only very
It's just a plane. Yeah, it's pretty loud for me. But
okay.
My mic is doing well in that regard. Then.
Okay.
Yeah. No. When I picked up that book, I was reading it, and it was all appeals to suffering. Like, how do we deal with death and talking about that, and it felt very disingenuous to me, and that's kind of weird. I felt that was kind of weird first instinct I had, because here's a book, right, that is trying to, as far as they're trying to convey, like they're trying to be transparent about like mortality and life and death and what happens after we die. But on the other hand, I was struck by just how tunnel visioned it was and how much propaganda it felt that was in it. I mean, it was kind of troubling, to be honest. Have you got any thoughts on like their handbooks? I just felt it was just such a strong reaction I had to it.
Well, it's a predatory religion. They unashamedly ask members or train members to pounce on suffering. So they even have video. I could show you videos of where they do dramatizations showing how when someone has lost someone in death, when they've lost a close family relative, that's the ideal time to recruit them. So, they're unashamed about it. They are unashamed about it. That they believe that, the ends justify the means. And if there's a way for them to get the foot in the door through through the misery that an individual is going through, then yeah, at least that way they're getting someone into paradise. And this kind of ends justify the means mentality is common among groups. You don't stop to question it when you're in the group, because you think, well, what matters most is that we're able to save as many people as possible from Armageddon. The actual methods, even if they're a bit off color sometimes, are irrelevant. You even have cases where Jehovah's Witnesses have been scouring the obituaries and writing to random people, random families in their community, contacting them based on the obituaries and trying to contact them that way and send them brochures about what happens when we die and where our dead loved ones go. So this is a group that in a very kind of vulture-like way tend to circle whenever there's any kind of calamity, because what it does is it makes someone emotionally vulnerable. When you go through a traumatic experience, whether it's a bereavement, whether it's divorce, whether it's losing your job, maybe you're suffering from depression, anything that makes you kind of a little bit uncertain and a little bit less strong emotionally, that's when you are susceptible, not just to Jehovah's Witnesses, but to basically any cult-like group. All cult-like groups do this. They've realized just through, trial and error that people are more susceptible to join when they are going through some kind of tragedy.
Yeah, that to me is just, it's quite jarring, So a few years ago as well, to think about, I've actually had quite a lot of encounters with Jehovah's Witnesses, and my mum actually talks about them sometimes, because basically an older couple used to come to my door, and I had the instinct to talk to and actually try and understand them. I did, even when I was probably about, I don't know what age, or maybe 15, something like that. And I was an atheist, and I still am. But I was still nevertheless interested in genuine conversations. And I had an interesting conversation with them, and they were like, "Hey, take these resources and have a look." And I had a few interactions with them. And the first time that I did, my mum was maybe present for one of them, and the one that she was present for, she was like, well, I would have died if I was a Jehovah's Witness, because they don't believe in blood transfusions. And it was my brother, I believe, and my mum had to have a blood transfusion, and if she didn't, she would have died.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like what? Because they fail to tell you that, don't they? I was asking them about it, and about the rule and things like that, and that's just one. It's quite a thing to leave out,
It's trickery. Let's just say it. When you're leaving out the really damning stuff, and you're only focusing on the kind of universally appealing stuff, like, wouldn't you like to frolic with pandas in a beautiful paradise where you can welcome back your loved ones? If you're only focusing on that message and leaving out, the kind of the small print, then what you're doing is you're deceiving someone. And again, Jehovah's Witnesses do this kind of slightly knowingly, slightly unknowingly, because again, in their mind, the ends justify the means. But the blood issue, I interviewed someone recently on my channel who'd kind of defected from the facilities in America, and he'd been on the Hospital Information Services Desk, which is kind of like the overarching kind of mission control for dealing with doctors and with issues where blood might be needed. And I asked him to give a ballpark number of how many Jehovah's Witness deaths he guessed there might be over the 3.5 year period that he was doing this job. Because even though they don't keep records, you know, he will have seen the emails coming through, and he will have heard the phone calls and that kind of thing. And when I pressed him on it, he said, "Oh, it will have been in the thousands," and that's over a 3.5 year period. So thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses in a 3.5 year period losing their lives due to this teaching. And what makes it especially grotesque, in my view, is that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't upfront about the fact that you will actually be penalized if you accept a blood transfusion as a Jehovah's Witness. So you will be, quote, disassociated for willfully and unrepentantly accepting blood. So in other words, if you accept blood and you later convince elders that you're sorry for doing it, then you won't be shunned. But if you accept blood and can't convince elders that you're sorry, then you will be shunned, and all believing family members and Jehovah's Witness friends will treat you as though you're dead. And that's the part that they miss out. That's the part they miss out when they go into hospitals, and they're called HLCs, Hospital Liaison Committees. They go into hospitals to try and ingratiate themselves with medical professionals, and they give these presentations about blood alternatives, but they don't explain that actually this is a situation where they will penalize members who refuse blood. And so what happens is hospitals, there was actually a National Secular Society investigation into this. The National Secular Society called around a bunch of NHS trusts to find out what their relationship was with the local HLCs. And a disturbing number of them had even allowed these elders to effectively write part of their policies for dealing with Jehovah's Witnesses. They give them the red carpet treatment. They allow into hospital wards elders whose job it is to effectively make sure Jehovah's Witnesses martyr themselves.
Jesus. It just goes really deep, doesn't it? This is a plan that goes just into the crevices, into the pores.
I try not to think about it too much because I get, as you can tell, I get quite emotional about it. And what disturbs me more than anything is that the government, like, for example, in the UK, just doesn't care. That, you know, they don't care. I've written an article on it for the National Secular Society. They did a brilliant job in getting it some media exposure when, you know, we had certain material, come to light that kind of proved how bad the problem was. But unfortunately, the media doesn't do much with it. And as we all know, when the media doesn't do much about it, there is no public outcry. And when there is no public outcry, the government doesn't do anything. So the way I often put it on my channel is we're living at the wrong point in history. You know, we're living in kind of a backwards age, quite frankly. And I think that future generations will look into all of this in the future and think, how on earth was this still being tolerated in the 21st century when people had the internet, you know?
Yeah. But, you know, it's interesting because the internet, whilst it has its depths and it has its resources, what I've always said about it is that it does teach you in an unhealthy way that, you know, if you type a question in, it comes up an answer, but it is shrouded as the answer a lot of the time. I mean, you know, for the majority of basic questions and things like that, but, you know, pertaining to religion or philosophy, it's quite hard to find content that is pretty in-depth or analytical, because if you are going to go that far, then you have to really commit to that, right? Like, it's because, I mean, when you were having doubts and going through that, that part of your journey, I mean, I can't begin to imagine how your mind would be like, is this the right decision? You know, like, which way do I go, backwards or forwards? And you know that there are people questioning it as well. I mean, how was that part, or how was that segment of of it for you. I mean, how did you psychologically cope with that?
It's terrifying. It is well, that's why I call my book The Reluctant Apostate, because I don't think any person who's exiting the Jehovah's Witness, when they first start questioning things, I'd be surprised if any of them are rubbing their hands thinking, yay, let's prove that this is all nonsense, because in many cases, they've already invested years, or in some cases, decades into this group. So you have, what we refer to as the sunk cost fallacy, but everyone's going to be afraid of cutting their losses when they're so far in, when their entire life is now enmeshed in this belief system. You basically reach the point where it has to be true. And I just happened through, a unique set of developments in my personal life, which I couldn't have predicted. I found myself in this situation where I was thinking, you know what, now would be a good point to just take a deep breath and make sure for myself that this is true before I recommit for basically the rest of my life. I need to know for sure, is this really the truth? And I know that I'm only going to be able to answer that question if I allow myself to look at critical information and objective materials. So it was terrifying. And I think the way I've described it is, you feel like there's going to be a thunderbolt come out of the sky and render you a smoldering stack of ash, because there's been so much paranoia drilled into you from when you were little at how dangerous apostate materials are, and how Satan's behind it all, and how you're going to die if you leave the organization. So I was completely terrified when I first went on an apostate website. And I can remember it was actually jwfacts.com, which, if your viewers are interested, is still a brilliant resource for objective information on the religion. And at the time, I just skipped past all of the kind of opening web pages, and I wanted to go straight to the page that told me who was behind it. I wanted to know who's behind this. And I found the page that Paul Grundy, who's the guy behind it, he'd written a little bit about himself, and he had a picture on there of him with his son. And something about just seeing him with his little boy made me think, okay, I feel, and I was purely judging him based on his appearance, but something made me think, okay, this guy looks like he could be trustworthy. I'll listen to what he has to say. And from that point forward, it was just tumbling down the rabbit hole, because once you start down that journey, the analogy I use quite often is the scene in The Wizard of Oz where they enter the Oz's throne room, and there's this huge kind of fireworks display in front of them, or visual display, and then there's this curtain in the corner, and it's don't look at the man behind the curtain. And once you've seen the kind of floundering man behind the curtain, you can't unsee him. You can't then go back and pretend that this huge vision is real, because you've seen it. So I think that's the problem that the organization has, is that ultimately, even if you kind of put aside all of the abuse and all of the scandals throughout its history and all of that, the fundamental problem that the organization has, and this is the answer I give whenever people say, why did you leave Jehovah's Witnesses? The fundamental problem is, it's not true. And once you find that out, you can't just then pretend that it's true any more than you can pretend that Elvis is still alive, or you can pretend
many people do. Yeah.
Which many people do, or you can pretend that it's a flat earth. There we go. We're going down another rabbit hole. Yeah. But you can't just pretend that something's true once you found out that it's not true.
Well, Nietzsche has a good quote, which is, if you stare into the abyss stares back onto thee. Right.
Wow,
and that has, I mean, it really is. I mean, he's, by my opinion, he's probably got the best quotes. I love quote mining for his books and things like that. So I'm curious. I've heard a lot about the afterlife and what they believe the afterlife is. Um, it's it's quite bizarre in many ways. Could you expand on their beliefs?
It is a bit complicated, yeah. Basically, I refer to it as two-tier Christianity. So, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that there is a heavenly class, or there are the anointed ones, and then there are the other sheep, or the earthly class, or those with the earthly hope. They believe that in all of history, if you take all of the Christians throughout history, going all the way back to the time of Jesus and the apostles, there's only 144,000, which is a number they pluck from Revelation. There's only 144,000 who go to heaven and who get to rule with Jesus in heaven over the earth. And surprise, surprise, the current 8 dudes on the governing body are in that number. Or so they tell us.
Yeah.
So that's the 144,000. Interestingly, when the religion first began as the Bible students, that was the only afterlife on offer. So you could only be part of the 144,000. They were only interested in kind of bringing people into that number. But they kind of reached this interesting crossroads in the period of Joseph Rutherford. You know, when you start to get to kind of membership numbers that are either approaching or maybe going slightly over 144,000, you know, how do you then explain where all these other people should go who you're actively attracting into the religion? And they came up with this really interesting bit of mental gymnastics where they said, well, when Jesus said, I have other sheep who are not of this fold, these also I should bring, which incidentally the Mormons teach means that's when Jesus was talking about the Native Americans. Jehovah's Witnesses teach that scripture is referring to everyone who lives on earth under the rule of Jesus and the 144,000. So Jehovah's Witnesses teach that basically everyone who has ever died, and it's been estimated, you can get figures up to like 100 billion people who have ever existed, you know, human beings who have ever existed. Everyone who has ever died right up to Armageddon will be resurrected into a future paradise. Everyone, including people like Vlad the Impaler, Osama bin Laden, you know, the worst characters from history, they all get a second chance. And when Armageddon strikes, however, if you're still on the earth at that time and you're still alive and have a pulse and you're not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you get killed. So you could be the nicest person imaginable. You could be just a really pleasant guy who helps old ladies across the road and you know, looks after stray kittens. But if you're not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you will die at Armageddon, and then your body and the bodies of billions of fellow non-Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's currently nearly 8 billion people on the planet, so nearly 8 billion bodies will somehow be disposed of. The entire earth will be terraformed into this quote-unquote paradise, and it will be, first of all, populated by the 8 million or however many Jehovah's Witnesses who've made it through Armageddon, and gradually, over a period of 1,000 years, everyone who has ever lived will ping back into existence, and they will have Bible studies to make them Jehovah's Witnesses too. That's the current teaching. You're laughing,
yeah,
but that's the current teaching.
It's you know, it's funny because like I've never been a Jehovah's Witness, but from what I've heard, you know, well, let's just say in your discussion with Chris Stuckman, because that for me was just really, really cool. I that was just one interaction that I was just like, that's awesome. You know, you go into how it might seem absurd now, right, when we say it, and it is. But when you're brought up to believe that, and there's no comparison with other views, and you haven't really been out in reality itself and observed and talked to other people, I guess anything under that context you could take very seriously, and people do, of course. And
if you ever want to know what it's like to be raised in a cult, because, you know, it really irritates me when people, particularly atheists, sometimes say, oh, you just have to be stupid to be religious, or you just have to be stupid to be in a cult. That's not how it works. And if you want to know what it's like to be raised in a cult, go watch the film The Village by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yes, that's good. Great.
That perfectly describes, obviously, I don't think that's what he was intending to do, but that describes how it works. So when you, from your earliest memories, have been presented with a reality, then that becomes your reality, no matter what everyone around you in civilized society thinks. You know, if that's all that's been drilled into you from when you were very small, then that is your universe. And that's partly why the process of waking up from a cult is so terrifying and in many ways traumatizing, because it's like your universe is collapsing. You know, your entire paradigm, your entire vision in your mind of how reality works just disintegrates. And then you've got to start rebuilding it. And some rebuild it from other religions, and others, like myself, say, well, let's go right back to the drawing board. You know, where does the Bible come from? And how do we know that it is what it claims to be? And that kind of thing. So that's what led me to atheism. But it's a very, very, it's hard to describe. It's like when you're in a cult, especially when you're raised in a cult, your life, you're living someone else's life. And when I look back now on my life as a Jehovah's Witness, it's like some kind of weird dream. It really is.
And I also saw, I don't know if you know Matt Dillahunty, the atheist. Yeah. I mean, he's pretty big, so yeah. I mean, it's one clip on YouTube, but I think it's originally from the Atheist Experience on their actual channel. But there was one video in particular that I watched ages ago, and even to this day I remember it, because the caller essentially was they were both talking about her having doubts, and she was like genuinely asking these questions, like, but if Christianity isn't true, then like, where do we go when we die? Like, do we genuinely just go? Like, where do we go? And she was also saying, I don't know which part of the family it was, but she was really concerned about a member of her family, and she was like, but so I won't see them again. And she was kind of, she was, it really did sound from her voice that she was genuinely concerned about her recent revelations, that actually maybe this might not be true. And what Matt Dillahunty said is that, paraphrasing, like, this is what religion can do to people. If you're brought up on these kind of views, and then they're taken away from you, and then you distance yourself from them, it's more harmful. The brute facts of death and losing loved ones and so on, the implications of atheism. It's far more difficult to grapple with those questions if you were under the assumption that they were not true in the first place, that actually people did go to heaven and you'd see your family members. That stuck with me, not only because of how emotional she was and upset, but it was just a realization that, like, the atheists, for example, I have more or less been, I've basically been atheist all my life, really. I've never seriously believed in a God. And so these facts, these brute facts about our existence, to me were like, yeah, okay, look, you know, it's a gradual thing, because you grow up and you have these questions and you talk to people, and it's just like, yeah, we die and we don't really know what happens afterwards. Make the most of your time while it's there. And you're just like, yeah, like, okay, well, I guess I just have to do that. But when it's when it's a boulder that's falling on your head all at once, that is entirely different. And I think that is,
Yeah.
and that is one aspect of the psychological consequences of not only, the JW, but like religion as a whole to some extent.
Yeah, it's like learning how to walk. And,
Right.
I alluded earlier to the fact that my mother died when I was 21. And that was a key reason for me to kind of bury my doubts, was because I was so determined to see her again. And then you wake up from this religion that's been telling you, oh, well, your mother's not quite dead. She's still alive in Jehovah's memory, and you're going to see her again if you do X, Y, and Z. It's very, very distressing to suddenly have to start that grieving process all over again, because you've been hooked on some kind of, fake reality. This what's the word for a drug that doesn't really do anything?
Placebo. Right.
Placebo. You've been hooked on some placebo that hasn't really been doing anything, and suddenly you're having to confront the notion of not just the mortality of people that you care about who have died, but also your own mortality, and also the fact that you're not coming back.
Yeah.
And I can understand why for some people that's just too much to handle. And so that's why on my channel, I don't insist that everyone grows up and gets rid of religion. I don't mince my words when I say what I think about the Bible and what I think about religion, but I leave it to the viewer and to decide what they wish to do. And I can fully understand and empathize with those who say, just for my own peace of mind and just to make it through each day, I've got to believe that I'm going to see my nan again or whatever, or that my mother is somehow watching me or whatever, which I actually personally find a very disturbing thought. If my mother were floating around and watching, even the times of intense sadness in my life and not being able to do anything about it, I think that would be hell for her.
It's like a celestial judgment in some sense.
Yeah, that would be really weird. But whatever kind of gets people through. I just think life is such a complicated thing, and there are so many issues to contend with, and mental health as well can be so fragile. Who am I to tell anyone, you need to grow up and you need to embrace atheism? That's everyone's personal journey, and I don't begrudge anyone who just isn't ready for it yet.
Yeah, I think that's something that is missed out. And you mentioned how, a lot of atheists point that out. It's like, we'll grow up, It's not, again, I say this from someone who from the outside looking in, but like, and I guess it also helps I study psychology at university at the moment, but like, it's it just lacks emotional intelligence to assume that, to say, hey, look, just grow up, like we ain't going to heaven, grow up. It's like that's a pretty groundbreaking thing to say to somebody who for years has been in anguish about it. I mean, it's just,
and it doesn't endear them to you. It's it's not an endearing thing to say to anyone, is it? And similar to what I was saying earlier about the word cult. If you really, really want to have a productive and meaningful dialogue with someone, don't insult them and don't patronize them. This is basic kind of human etiquette 101, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it really is. In your discussion with Chris Stuckman, you said something that stood out to me. You said that a lot of people in the situation that you were in, they say, I would go back in time and I would change. What I did, I would tell my previous self, like, what are you doing? Maybe you should rethink this. Read this book or two. Maybe you could bring back your book, bring yourself your own book. That'd be a paradox of sorts.
That's a Back to the Future moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, sounds pretty
great,
cool.
Scott.
Yeah, and it really struck me because I I could understand where you were coming from, because there's just a lot there, because the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh yeah, well, I would definitely do that. But I think that whenever we have questions about regret and things like that, I think maybe we can both agree that we just don't know what would have happened otherwise, and to play with what could have been, it can be very toxic.
Yeah.
So can you expand on why you would not change that, and how maybe a toxic, unhelpful, unconstructive kind of approach to it?
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't begrudge any ex-Jehovah's Witness or anyone who's been in a cult or fundamentalist environment who does say that they would change things, who does say that if they could somehow get in a time machine, they would go back and convince themselves to, convince themselves to not go down this route. It's just that, I've done a lot of thinking about this, and in my own case, even though I wasted so much time in that religion and wasted so many years and so many, doors I was knocking on, and streets I was walking down, and it was a monumental waste of a huge chunk of my life. And it also led to many, it led to a great deal of trauma, which in lots of nuanced ways I'm still going through now. I just feel like in my own case, what I went through made me who I am. And I think that's kind of true in many negative situations. When almost anyone goes through a hardship of any kind, and it can be a really traumatic hardship. And I've got to be careful here because, I obviously have spoken to a lot of sexual abuse survivors. So I'm not suggesting in any way that sexual abuse is something that you should go through. But I'm talking about things that kind of adversities or setbacks that ideally, if you'd have known about it, you probably would have avoided. But in my case, going through the Jehovah's Witness upbringing that I went through and being in it for so many years put me in a unique position where I was able to help other people. And if I had gone back in time and stopped myself, then, my YouTube channel wouldn't exist. And anyone who has found my YouTube channel instrumental in their awakening from the Jehovah's Witness religion would very likely still be in the Jehovah's Witness religion. So, and that's not to mention other kind of causality related issues, such as my two children wouldn't exist because I met them. I met their mother as a result of being a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah. So, yeah, I could go on and on and on, but basically, I think that we are who we are as people, not just because of the good things that happen to us, but in many ways, the bad things that happen to us. And, life is a learning process. And so, no matter how bad things get, the way we kind of grow beyond those things and the way we heal and the way we learn from those negative experiences literally changes who we are as people. So if you were interviewing the Lloyd who did get that visit from me and who did no longer decide to be a Jehovah's Witness, it wouldn't be me, So literally, I would not exist as the person I am today if that had happened. So
we wouldn't want that.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad at least someone thinks that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Thank you. That was just a really interesting response that I, when I first heard you, mention that, I was like, I kind of want you to go more into that. And yeah, so
I'm happy to.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And so what it the future and the present. So we have things progressing in a sense, because we do have the internet, which, as we mentioned or agreed has its pros and cons. Where do we go from here in terms of like helping people in relationship to JW, and how do we guide them, and how do we communicate with them? Because I was thinking about this, like this is one of the hardest things, because as I said, I talked to a few people, and and from what you say as well, and from other accounts, it feels to me that it's the first thing that's really difficult is to actually just have genuine conversation, a genuine exchange that is human, not under any pretense of like propaganda, or even on even on the atheist side, that they might be overly angry, they might say the wrong things at times. How do you say that we open up a dialogue that is as genuine and as consistent as possible to kind of gain some, I don't know, like understanding maybe between, or I don't know what the solution would be other than to abolish. I really don't know. I'm struggling. What would you say?
I just think it's really, really important to be kind. You know, when you see Jehovah's Witnesses on the street corner with their literature carts, imagine yourself as one of them. Imagine yourself, and not all Jehovah's Witnesses are raised as Jehovah's Witnesses. Sometimes people do get preyed upon when they're in vulnerable situations and they join as adults. But just for the sake of argument, imagine that that's all they've ever known. They've only ever known the Jehovah's Witness religion from their earliest memories. And imagine how you would react in that situation if someone came up to you and was mocking you and jeering at you and being insulting or demeaning or condescending. It's not going to make any difference. It's going to make your day worse because you're going to feel rubbish later on, and it's going to make them feel worse, and it's frankly going to make them pack up and leave. So no one wins in that situation. The best thing to do is to just be as kind as possible. Don't go out to win any arguments. You're not going to win any arguments. You're not going to get them to abandon a lifetime of beliefs just because you've come up with some profound comment. It's just not how it works. It's not how the human brain works. We have such a thing as cognitive dissonance. And without going into too much detail, cognitive dissonance is actually a good thing. It's something that we all have. It's something that serves an evolutionary purpose, because if we were the sort of beings who could hold a belief or a set of beliefs, and anyone could just come up to us and change our minds just like that, it would actually undermine our entire sense of self. So our entire sense of self is tied up with what we believe. And as a result of that, we have this thing called cognitive dissonance, where we're resistant to anything that conflicts with what we perceive to be as reality. So be mindful of cognitive dissonance. Understand that you're not going to change their minds with one profound statement or one witty comment, and instead set out to just sow some seeds and maybe make a few observations or viewpoints that may not persuade them there and then, but perhaps may linger in their mind, so that when they go home later in the evening and they're eating their meal or they're watching the telly, it pops back in their mind and they think, oh yeah, there was that point that guy made. That's the very best you can hope for when you see a Jehovah's Witness. And I strongly believe that if more people had that attitude, there could be more progress. But if you ask me what the future is, I think that I like to think that all abusive cults will one day have a day of reckoning, and that governments will one day get their shit together and realize that it's not okay for these groups to be harming people in the way they're harming people and inflicting so much misery. If I'm being completely brutally honest, I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But I consider myself and others who do the work that I do to be standing on the shoulder of giants. We have so many brilliant people who've come before us, who've left us so many resources and so many brilliant ideas. And if we can stand on what they've achieved and then pass the baton forward to the next generation, It might not even be the next generation. It might be the generation after that. But some generation in the future is hopefully going to see a time when cults don't have the influence that they have today.
Yeah, I definitely see it as something that, like many things that we view today as abhorrent and disgusting and outright strange, you know, this may be one of those things that in the future it'd be like, so we were in the 21st century, but this was still around, despite the technological progress.
The same way we look back
yeah.
on the 16th century, the 17th century, and all of the barbarity that used to happen then. That's how future generations will look back on our time in history. I'm convinced of that. If the human race lasts that long, just a whole other subject.
I appreciate that you're fairly optimistic in that regard. Yeah. If not that it will. So I'm curious, if somebody is watching this video, right, and they find this, I don't know, in the future somewhere, and they are, you know, a Jehovah's Witness, or they're you know, learning about it, and they feel maybe it might be convincing, and they've maybe looked at this video, you know, this maybe their first exposure, let's say, which I don't know how, because your channel, you know, would be perfect. Yeah, so a quick plug. But what would you say to them, basically, to help them contemplate this subject? Like, what would you say that could motivate them to think more critically about it, or to help with, I don't know, the psychological side of it?
I have what's called the win-win scenario, which I can repeat if you like. So the win-win scenario is this. So either, let's say you're watching this as a Jehovah's Witness and you've stumbled on this video and you want to see what this big bad apostate has to say. Either your religion, the truth, as you call it, is the truth and it's true, or it isn't. Okay. If it's the truth, then you should be able to go on my channel, watch my videos, go on apostate websites, read what they have to say, fact check everything, make sure they're quoting every publication properly, examine all of their arguments, apply critical thinking, and at the end of it, if what you have is the truth, you should actually not just be validated in what you believe, but your faith will actually be stronger than it can ever be. And you will be some kind of faith Goliath in terms of how powerful you are in your new powers of having completely debunked apostates. And there'll never be any kind of lingering doubt in your mind for the rest of your life, because you'll have done it once and for all. You'll have cracked it. Okay. So that's a win. If, on the other hand, what you have isn't the truth, and if you are being lied to, and you go on my channel and you go on various websites and you find this out, then you get to do something about it. And that's a win as well, because you're then in control of your own destiny. So it's a win-win. It's a win if you find out that I'm lying, or it's a win if you find out that Jehovah's Witnesses are lying. Either way, you're in a stronger position.
I love that. So finally, what books would you recommend, apart from your own, of course, which I really want to read. I have to admit, I haven't read it yet. It's on my list. As well as I saw you on Twitter actually, corresponding with, is it Ali Miller? Is it how you pronounce The Last Days? I want to check that one out as well. And I was just wondering if there's any books that you'd recommend. I don't know if you've checked out The Last Days yet. I assume you may have.
It's definitely on my, because I've literally just received a copy from, I think, her agent, and I really want to read it, and I don't want to kind of invite her before I've read it, if that makes sense, on my channel. And that's even assuming she wants to come on my channel. I don't want to second guess anything right now. But yeah, check that out. Leaving the Witness by Amber Scorer is another brilliant book. Crisis of Conscience is an absolute must read. In fact, I would say that probably that's more important to read than my book, because that was written by a former governing body member, and he shares some very, very interesting insights from the kind of hierarchy of the organization that we just couldn't know about otherwise, and which, completely turn the entire belief system on its head. But he does so in a very kind and very compelling way. So yeah, Crisis of Conscience. Trying to think that there are quite a few books, to be honest, to choose from. Just browse on Amazon and see what takes your fancy. Yeah, I have a second book.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Called How to Escape from Jehovah's Witnesses. Do you need me to tell you what that's about?
I don't think so.
No.
But how is that? How is that? I mean, I suppose the first book that you wrote, from what I tell, is, it's basically your story, but also, from the excerpts and things like that. It's kind of like your journey, but also talking about the doctrine of JW. Out of curiosity, how, despite names obviously being different and the premise being different, but how do you describe them actually being different in like your writing?
Between the two books I've written,
of both of them.
Well, yes. The how-to book is really, really short. I deliberately wrote it to be kind of to the point and something that could, more than anything, I don't know how much you know about self-publishing, but the shorter the book is, the cheaper you can actually sell it for. So it's much cheaper to buy the how-to book. The Reluctant Apostate is more expensive because it's thicker. It's actually 800 pages.
Yeah, I saw that. I was yeah.
But The Reluctant Apostate kind of interweaves my personal story with the with like a discussion of the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, and it devotes 3 chapters to the history of Jehovah's Witnesses. And it also has a few kind of grey boxes where I speak directly to Jehovah's Witnesses. So the Reluctant Apostate is written for an audience, assuming that the audience doesn't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. But the little grey boxes acknowledge that every now and then there might be a Jehovah's Witness reading it, and then I speak to them directly. So that's basically how I did it. And I'm going to be shortly doing the 2nd edition, and I've started work on that. And I plan to do a sequel to The Reluctant Apostate. So you heard it here first.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, I mean, well, I want to check them out when I can, to be honest. Like, so you say the 2nd edition, and what are your additions like? What have you?
Only because it's such a moving target. I mean, that the religion is changing constantly. It's already practically unrecognizable from the religion that I was in and that I left. I stopped attending meetings around 2011, 2012, and that was before they started doing all the videos, and just before they started doing the literature carts and the jw.org website. So, there's so many changes that have been made even since I left. And I published The Reluctant Apostate in 2017, and there's been a whole bunch of changes since then. So it's purely about trying to bring it as up to date as possible. It's already arguably one of the most up to date books, being circa 2017, but now we're in 2022 and there's been the pandemic and everything. And I want to try and make it as future proof as possible, and then move on to the sequel, and then let it just stand in its own place in time, so that when people read it in the future, they accept, okay, this was written in the 2nd edition, was released in 2022, and I can't expect it to know what would happen in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a good plan. And
yeah,
have you any idea like when this might release, like a estimated
time? I'd really like it to be this year. Minimum probably next year, but if I can possibly get it out this year, because I've drastically kind of rethought the way I'm going to do it, and it should be a bit simpler to do it. Previously I wasn't planning on doing a sequel, but now I'm planning on doing a sequel. It frees me up to kind of not do the total surgery to the reluctant apostate that would have been required if I wasn't doing a sequel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you might by that point hit the 1,000-page mark as well.
Oh God, oh no! I think it's just going to have to be reformatted, to be honest. Yeah, but because I tried to give it bigger font because I hate it. I like the idea of people who don't have very good eyesight being able to read it very easily, but I might just have to reduce the font. Who knows? I'll cheat in some way.
Well, I've always found when it's a longer book, I like to get hardback editions because, like you say, the font is actually bigger, and also it's just a better reading experience, I think.
I enjoy reading hard, physical copies rather than Kindle personally, but each to their own.
No, I'm not a huge fan of the Kindle. Anyway, thank you so much for talking with me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on your channel, and I wish you every success. I know what it's like when you first start out on YouTube, and it can be a grueling, thankless process. So you have my solidarity, and I wish your channel every success.
Thank you so much. And perhaps in the future, well, maybe to talk about, new projects, the revised, edition, perhaps.
Sure.
Sequel, whatever. We'll
feel free to have me back at any time. Yeah.
All right. Cheers. Well,
thanks so much.